Right now on the Daily Debrief.
Marquise Lloyd is dying in prison by your verdict.
A jury must decide whether a man who killed his ex-girlfriend and her unborn child should be put to death.
The death penalty is the appropriate punishment.
Plus, a legal battle shapes up over the funeral for a Fort Worth woman shot and killed by a police officer. And closing arguments in the trial of a man accused of murdering a doctor. Do a sheriff's payments to a key witness make the state's case unbelievable?
Taylor Schumacher is going to make more money out of this contract killing than he ever made.
The Daily Debrief brings you the day in court. It's Monday, October 21st.
Welcome to the Debrief, everybody. Let's begin with closing arguments in the case of a Florida doctor beaten to death with a hammer. Dr. Teresa Sievers did not show up to work, and a friend who checked on her at home found her beaten with a hammer. Nothing, including money, had been taken. Police think her husband asked for help to kill her. Investigators say that husband, Mark Sievers, hired his friend Curtis Wright and Wright's friend Jimmy Rodgers to kill the wife. Rodgers is on trial. Wright, however, cut a deal and faced cross-examination after some key testimony. Sievers, the husband, faces a separate trial later on. Attorneys Chad Young, Melissa Lefkowitz, and Michael Bryant are here tonight. Let's begin with the state's closing arguments.
Let's start with Teresa Sievers' last word. Why? As Teresa Sievers lay cold on her kitchen floor, Mark Sievers called not his mother, who had been watching the animals that weekend, but Mark Detritus, an acquaintance, to have him come to the house and check. Dr. Detritus finds Teresa Sievers, and emergency personnel are called. And as we heard from Adam Hughes, when they arrive and they enter the house, they don't go beyond the door into the kitchen because they see Teresa Sievers and they know she is deceased.
The state says the case nearly went cold from there, were it not for one alleged conspirator who flipped and cooperated.
For 10 days, nothing that was pursued, no part of the investigation pointed anywhere. And then, July 9th, a phone call, a flight to Illinois, and then a name, Curtis Wayne Wright, and a search warrant of Curtis Wayne Wright's residence. Curtis Wayne Wright's personal cell was taken into evidence, as was a garment that was found in his car outside his residence. Checking all the names to see if any of those in the phone had any information that might assist the Lee County Sheriff's Office as they looked to try and figure out what happened. A happenstance conversation with Jimmy Ray Rodgers. He was not a suspect. He was just a name in a phone log. Jimmy Ray Rodgers stated he didn't know where Curtis Wayne Wright was the weekend of June 27th, and he himself, he had not been in Florida.
But prosecutors say a rental car from Missouri tied Wright and Rodgers to this crime. The defense said the evidence just isn't enough. The defense admits Jimmy Rodgers was in Florida, but says he was not involved in the killing.
She's as much a country girl who's scared as Curtis Wright is a good citizen who wants to do the right thing. Taylor Schumacher's a grifter. She'd do anything for money. Jimmy Rodgers had been her meal ticket, working extra shifts at Doe Run to support her and her kids. Now she has the taxpayers of Lee County to do that for her. $400 every month. $18,600. All you got to do is testify. There has been nothing shown to you that Jimmy Rodgers was involved in a conspiracy. This idea is ridiculous, that Mark Sievers got this going, and there's been no evidence of any of that. Most of all, there's been no evidence that anybody made any money off of it. That's a conspiracy. When people have some reason, they're in a common cause to do. Curtis Wright came down here and went crazy and killed somebody. That doesn't mean he's in a conspiracy with him. It means he had the misfortune of being with him.
You heard those complaints in the presence of the jury about the ex-girlfriend's testimony. Well, the defense made a similar argument earlier in the day in an attempt to get the judge to throw out the charges.
There is no evidence that puts Jimmy Ray Rodgers in that house other than the word of Curtis Wayne Wright. And we know that Curtis Wayne Wright's word is not worth the proffer agreement that the state gave him. He had great motive to listen to the story that was fed to him by the detectives. They allowed him to lie to them during his first proffers. They got played by Curtis Wayne Wright. That's what the evidence has shown. His word is not trustworthy because his story makes no sense. For every bit of evidence that the state presented about the phones and the tower dumps and the pinging, none of it actually puts Jimmy Ray Rodgers in the house on Jarvis Street.
Okay, of course, one bizarre twist in this case are those $400 a month payments from the sheriff's department to the defendant's ex-girlfriend who we've been talking about. She testified that the defendant confessed to her, and she's been paid about $19,000 at this point in the case. The defense says the payments suggest her testimony is bought and paid for.
When asked, what is Mr. Rodgers' nickname? And then the state brings it up, what is his nickname? Taylor Showmaker has to admit that when she swore to tell the truth at a deposition, she said, I'd never heard anybody call him that. She will say what she needs to say because not only is she taking $19,000 from the Lee County Sheriff's Office, not only has she been flown out to California by the media, and it looks like there's going to be more of that, but there was also talk of a $50,000 reward. The state forgets that when Ms. Fitzgeorge was talking to Ms. Showmaker, and keep in mind the state was laying a lot of credence into what was in the cooler, Ms. Showmaker on the stand under oath said, I never looked into the cooler. She was very adamant about that. The state then had to say, but what'd you tell us before? What'd you say in a statement? Once again, this is the Lee County Sheriff's Department feeding the state's main witnesses what they need to say in order to make a case. They're not trustworthy, and when you rely on the evidence as it was presented, the JOA should be granted because the reasonable hypothesis is Mr. Rodgers was never in that house.
What was in the cooler? Evidence of the murder. That's what the state says. The bottom line is the judge kept the case alive. And the state's other star witness, of course, is cooperating defendant Curtis Wright. Here's how he testified that he and defendant Jimmy Rodgers attacked Dr. Sievers.
I swung the hammer and I hit her.
When you hit her, did you expect, what was your expectation when you hit her with the hammer?
I expected it to knock her out.
It didn't knock her out, did it?
No.
It's a little more difficult than you thought it would be?
I've never hit anybody with a hammer before.
How many times did you hit Dr. Sievers with that hammer?
3. She was looking at me through her arms, and she said, why?
She said, why?
Yeah.
To you?
Yes.
And then you said Mr. Rodgers came from somewhere and he started hitting her. What did he do?
Just started hitting her over and over.
How would you describe how he was hitting her?
In a frenzy.
A frenzy?
She turned more into the kitchen and bent over. It seems like she had a hand on the countertop. After she was down on the floor, he continued to hit her.
And at some point, did Mr. Rodgers stop hitting Dr. Sievers with the hammer?
Yes, I'd ask him to stop.
Attorneys Chad Young, Melissa Lefkowitz, and Michael Bryant are here tonight, of course. So, Chad, these payments to the ex-girlfriend will apparently continue through this trial. Our experts have heard of payments to informants and sometimes payments to ensure that an indigent witness is available for trial. $400 a month, does that raise your suspicions?
Well, it certainly chips away at her credibility. It gives her a motive to be on that stand. It gives her a motive to be given the testimony that she's giving.
And the body language raised questions to me, at least. I went back and looked at some of her testimony. There was a lot of looking at the various attorneys during the answering of the questions, not looking at the jury, not looking at who was asking the questions. So, Chad, does that chip away at her credibility too?
Absolutely. It seems that she's not confident in her answers. She's checking with her attorneys to see if this okay if I testify to this particular fact or question.
Melissa Lefkowitz, what do you make of this? The ex-girlfriend claims not only did this defendant confess, but that she, meaning the ex-girlfriend, watched him destroy his phone and a second hammer, which was presumably a second murder weapon. Do you believe her, or do you buy this defense theory that she should not be trusted?
I agree with the defense that she should not be trusted. I think that there's a lot going on here that's going to make this a very difficult case for the prosecutors to prove. Credibility of the witnesses is just one of the big problems. Another problem is motive. Where is the motive? And even though we don't need to produce motive, it's very difficult to stomach that this guy, who's so attenuated from this case, is the actual killer.
Attenuated is the key word there. This guy is several people removed. It's why I put all the mugshots up on the screen at the beginning of the broadcast here. Michael Bryant, though, here's the thing. The state's going to rely on that testimony from Curtis Wright that we just heard, and that's very damaging to listen to him say, I was involved in this, I swung the hammer, and this defendant sitting in front of me was there as well.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, I felt he is the ball game, Curtis Wright Jr. Now, I know when he was sitting there, I thought for a minute, hey, wait, is that Bryan Cranston playing Walt White from Breaking Bad? No, he's not an actor. So unless the jury believes he's making the whole thing up, which is what the defense wants you to believe, it's the most damning testimony.
Making it up to save himself, he got a sweet deal for getting up there and basically leading police to the others. We'll wait and see how this rolls out when the jury gets the case, which should be very shortly. The father of Fort Worth police shooting victim Tatiana Jefferson has shut down other family members' attempts to give her a funeral. A judge granted Marquise Jefferson a temporary restraining order, which blocked other relatives from holding services this past weekend. A probate judge heard further arguments on the matter today. The victim's father says the rest of the family would be invited to the ceremony he plans to hold. And still ahead tonight here on The Debrief, a look ahead to the critical hearing this week in the case of a man accused of murdering an Iowa college student. Plus, the penalty phase of the trial of the man convicted of murdering his pregnant ex-girlfriend. New details as the jury weighs life or death.
I'm Dan Abrams, and this is the Law&Crime Network.
His body just went boom.
She did it! We've been covering 2 trials, of course.
The only 24/7 network with expert legal analysis and gavel-to-gavel live trial coverage.
He kissed me goodbye on the cheek. That was the last time we saw him.
From high-profile cases to the most compelling local trials.
You didn't expect her. Let me finish.
We cover the most interesting and important legal news going on across the country.
A verdict in the case of an Ohio woman who took the stand and admitted she shot and killed her military husband.
And our multi-platform brand is resonating. From syndication.
With more, we're joined by Law&Crime Network host Jesse Weber.
To our expert analysis.
With me now is Rachel Stockman, editor-in-chief for Law&Crime Network.
This former head prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and host of Law&Crime Network, Bob Bianchi.
On Monday, the Law&Crime Network covering the trial live.
Let's get to the top legal stories of the day with Jesse Weber, attorney and anchor for the Law&Crime Network. So good morning, Jesse.
With dozens of places to watch, we already have tens of millions of minutes viewed per month. And our viewers and readers are engaged, with more than 30,000 comments per month on the site, a bustling chat room, and an average watch time of 30 minutes.
Womanizer, that's fine. It doesn't make me guilty of solicitation of capital murder.
This is Law&Crime.
We got a lot of fascinating cases, as we always do, gavel-to-gavel coverage.
In the fastest growing genre in America, we are uniquely positioned to dominate. This is Law&Crime.
Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Our son Arjun was born with cystic fibrosis. CF is a genetic disease that shortens lives. When the foundation was founded in 1955, children with CF rarely lived long enough to attend kindergarten. Today, thanks to the foundation's groundbreaking research, advocacy, and care, some people with CF are attending college, getting married, and starting families. We've made amazing progress, but until a cure is found for all people with CF, we will not stop. Help us add tomorrows. Visit cff.org today.
Matthew. I know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening to you, but I am. And what you say really does matter to me.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me, and they make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for preparing me for what's ahead.
Talk. They hear you.
An important hearing this week in the alleged murder of an Iowa college student. 20-year-old Molly Tibbetts disappeared in July last year. After a massive search, authorities came to suspect Christian Rivera. He's said to have led police to Tibbetts' remains in a farm field. The purpose of a hearing this week is to determine if the rules of evidence and the U.S. Constitution require evidence be kept out of the trial. Law&Crime is planning live coverage of this two-day hearing tomorrow and Wednesday here on the network and on our streaming platforms. The key moments and decisions will be right here on the Daily Debrief. And now to the penalty phase of the trial of a Florida man convicted of killing his pregnant ex-girlfriend. Markeith Lloyd admitted he shot and killed Sade Dixon, but he claimed it was self-defense. The jury didn't buy that excuse. Lloyd injured Dixon's brother in the process, and after leading authorities on a manhunt, he shot and killed a police officer. Her death is for a separate trial. The jury must now decide whether Lloyd dies in prison or is put to death by the state.
You may consider the aggravating factor that he was on probation at the time he committed that crime, which will be explained to you again by David Kennard shortly. You may also consider that he has been convicted of the prior felony involving the use of or threat of violence to another person, and those would include his conviction for battery on a law enforcement officer in 1998, the murder of Sade Dixon, the attempted murder of Ronald Stewart, of Stephanie Daniels, and of Dominique Daniels. So for each count, you may consider that the defendant has been convicted of 5 prior felonies involving the use of or threat of violence to another person. And when you are determining the proper punishment for the defendant's decision to murder Sade Dixon's unborn child, there's a third aggravating factor that you may consider, which is that the victim, the unborn child, was under the age of 12 years old at the time he was killed.
The defense pointed to Markeith Lloyd's broken home, criminal record, history of drug sales, and alleged mental illness as reasons for the jury to spare Lloyd from a death sentence.
This convicted felon, as he told you from the stand, was trying to get his life in order. No new offenses. He's working. He's renting a house. But he's still a mentally ill man. That when he gets out, the events of him being robbed twice, you have the events that transpired before he went to prison, because we don't even know all the stuff that happened this 14 years in prison, but one can imagine. But you had the 16-year-old being kidnapped and brutally beaten, being at the murder scene when his cousin was gunned down, the 2016 where his friend was killed. You have his mental illness, the delusional disorder, and then you have trauma, hypervigilance. That's something that happens when someone has been traumatized and they start viewing things through a prism that is unlike mine and yours. And so Markeith Lloyd, when he got to that house on the 13th, not only was delusionally disordered, but had hypovigilance and trauma.
Lloyd was convicted in 1998 for battery on a law enforcement officer and for resisting arrest. The Orlando police officer from that case back then testified in this case that he pulled Lloyd over for speeding and that Lloyd became violent.
I was holding on to his right wrist, again, trying to get his hands behind his back, and he had, with his left hand, he punched me in the right side of my face.
After he punched you in the face, were you able to stay a hold of him?
No, sir.
What happened?
It caused me to break away, and he started swinging his arms and hitting me.
Where?
In the face and chest area.
Can you estimate about how many times he hit you in the face and chest area?
It was approximately 7 to 10 times. He took off running, and I chased him. He turned and squared up and faced me again, and I extended my asp baton.
Did you give him any orders or commands?
I told him to get on the ground.
Did he?
No. And as he was running away again, I was finally able to kind of grab him from behind. He started flailing his elbows and hitting me again in the chest area. We kind of fell down to the ground together, and I fell on top of him.
And what did you do when you were on top of him?
I just laid there.
And what happened when your backup arrived?
I rolled off of him, and they handcuffed him.
Markeith Lloyd's mother testified that she married and became pregnant at age 16. She said Lloyd's father was abusive and that Markeith himself had been kidnapped at one point.
Markeith opened the door, and you heard the movie Elephant Man. He looked like Elephant Man. His mouth was here. His face was just like, it seemed like it was in the back. He was just swole. He couldn't see out but a glare out of one eye.
Did you take him to the hospital?
Yeah, I took him to the hospital.
How long was he in the hospital?
A day or two.
Did you go to the police?
I went to the police.
And what happened?
They didn't take it serious.
After that event happened, did anything change about Markeith?
Yeah. He didn't trust the police. He wasn't right. He wasn't right. Something. He wasn't right.
The defendant's mother also testified about treating him for mental illness.
Did you find out at some point that Markeith was selling drugs?
Yes, I did.
Did you catch him with money?
Yes, I did.
Did you take the money away from him?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did he give you money at times to help you take care of the family?
Yes, he did. Whatever. Light bill, a mortgage, whatever that I needed, he gave it to me.
Did there come a time when you took him to a place called Laurel Oaks?
Yes.
How old was he at that time?
Oh, he was young. I want to say 9. It was like a mental institute.
And why did you think he needed to go there?
Markeith held a lot of stuff within, you know, in being taking care of me, his sister, his brother. So, you know, he was what we had.
Did they try to medicate him while he was there?
Yes. He called me. He said, Mama, come get me. The medicine has me drowsy and dopey, and I'm just falling around. He said, come get me.
Let's go back to our guest now one last time. Melissa Lefkowitz, prior assault here against law enforcement, 2 cocaine charges. He's out on probation when he shoots his girlfriend and then later shoots and kills a police officer. Is a troubled childhood, a fear of the authorities, alleged mental health issues enough to spare this man's life?
You know, it's very compelling, and it's what we as defense attorneys introduce in hopes to do exactly that.
Certainly. Okay, so the jury's got to sit here, and Chad Young, I'm watching this guy's mother up on the stand, and I'm believing her. I don't think she's up there trying to cover for him. I think she's up there saying, hey, look, this guy's had a difficult life. The question is, again, is it enough of a mitigator to basically override what the state's trying to do?
She was very compelling, but I thought some of the most compelling part of her testimony was when she talked about how often she speaks to Markeith, how she plans on continuing to visit Markeith when he's in prison, and then she, of course, testified how much she loves him. I think the jury is going to remember that.
Michael Bryan, at the end of the day, the jury gets these aggravating factors from the state. They're set forth in the statute, and then the defense can throw anything it wants to basically mitigate. So we wind up hearing basically everything that has ever happened in someone's life that could have affected the person that they turn out to be. It's not really a surprise, the procedure that this case is taking.
No, I call this the boo-hoo portion of the process. You know, everybody needs to feel sorry for the guy. Just don't kill him. And I think it was a stroke of genius, really, for the defense attorney, who everybody feels is pretty darn good at his job, putting this guy on the stand in his own defense, because that was really a showcase of somebody who's got some problems. And if the guy's got some mental problems, we are reticent to recommend death for somebody in that position. I think he helped himself.
And Melissa, very quickly here, of course, that also tees up an appellate issue, because if we inject a lot of mental health into things, appellate courts look at that in death sentence cases.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
All right, we're going to wrap up the debrief here in a couple of minutes. Michael Bryant, appreciate your insight, along with Melissa Lefkowitz, Chad Young. Great opinions on the broadcast tonight. Reminder, programming-wise, folks, that we're going to be covering that high-profile Molly Tibbetts hearing starting tomorrow here on the Law and Crime Network. That is a hearing that will last 2 days. It will decide what evidence goes into the trial against Christian Rivera. You'll certainly want to watch that along with us. Thanks to those of you who watched the debrief and the network. Our live trial coverage resumes tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you then.
My name is Sam Leitch. About a year ago, I had a heart transplant. My life was saved on the last day that I was supposed to be on this planet. I don't know who my donor was, but that person saved my life. And now I know what a miracle feels like. It feels terrific. Having a new heart's given me time to spend more time with my loved ones, watching them grow up. That new heart gave me a new mission in life, and that is to get others to sign up to be organ and tissue donors. The most common thing I hear when I ask people why they haven't signed up is, I don't know, I just haven't thought about it. Well, why don't you think about it? Think about the life you might save or the life you might enhance. Over 130 million people have already signed up to be an organ, eye, or tissue donor. They're men and women, all ages, all races, and they have one thing in common. They want to save lives. Please sign up to be an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You don't want to miss your chance to save a life.
Hey everyone, I'm Jesse Weber, and this is legal news you can use. The internet can be a complicated place for many different reasons, but one of the questions that seems to always confuse people is, can I use a photo or image that I find online? Let's discuss. Okay, so first, copyrights. Copyrights are all the exclusive rights that someone has in an original work that he or she created, including images. How they're distributed, seen, copied, and otherwise used is up to the copyright owner. Generally, if you created the image, you automatically own the copyright in it. Pretty cool, right? What this means is that you usually need the permission of the copyright owner before using the image. However, ask yourself the following. Are you planning to use the image sparingly, or maybe only a portion of it? Are you not going to make money off of it? Are you using it in a news reporting, educational, or scholarly context that benefits the public? Are you completely changing the image so it's unrecognizable? Are you transforming the meaning of the image, like using it in a parody? Is it impossible to get the permission of the copyright owner? Well, if your answer is yes to some or all of these questions, then you may be able to use it without permission, but that's not always guaranteed. Also, sometimes images no longer are copyright protected, meaning they're in the public domain. Or the owner grants something called a Creative Commons license, allowing others to freely use the image in specific ways. There are websites that offer royalty-free stock images as well. You should look into all that too. Copyrights aside, if the image features a logo or slogan, or a person, particularly a celebrity, then other issues could come into play as well, including trademark, privacy, and right of publicity laws. I told you, complicated. So best practice is to get permission or give credit whenever you can before using an image, particularly on social media. For more legal news you can use, go to lawandcrime.com.
Can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me something. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, no thanks, not my thing.
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Do you know the signs of a brain aneurysm? The worst headache of your life? Pain behind one eye? Dizziness or blurry vision? Don't ignore it. Seek immediate emergency care. The Lisa Calagrassi Foundation. Learn more at lisafoundation.org.